Hi, my name is Sam Elogio. I'm grateful to have this opportunity to present to you this evening. I'll be talking about the black and white layer inside of Photoshop versus the Nik Silver Efex Pro 2 black and white processing tool. So let's start off with the black and white layer tool inside of Photoshop. We will use this picture of a lion as our demonstration. The first thing we'll want to do is go to the Layers tool and we will pick black and white. By default, Photoshop converts your image to black and white using what it figures are the proper settings. Let's look at the various options you have available to you. You can click on Auto and let Photoshop generate the settings according to what it believes are the best. Sometimes, it's hit and miss. Sometimes it's pretty close. Sometimes it's not. It's entirely up to you. Let's reset that. The next thing you could do is go into the presets. Now, these are presets delivered with Photoshop. You can actually add to the list yourself if you find yourself using a certain series of settings and you want to use it on an ongoing basis. Then you would simply create the settings, name it, store it, and then they would show up for your continued use in here. So let's look at some of these settings, and I'll just randomly pick some of the presets. Some you may like better than others. Okay, I'm not a big fan of many of them. I rarely do go into here, but that's entirely up to you. So the next option available to you is the ability to add a tint to your black and white image. So check the tint box and then you come over to the color square, click on it, and with your eyedropper select a color. So I'm just going to pick a softer yellow. Come in, and so now you can see the effect of the tint. So let's turn it off and turn it back on. So again, you can pick any color under the rainbow. It's entirely up to you. It's not something I do too much, but it's a nice option to know that it's there. The next thing you can do is move these sliders around. Now these sliders are related to the various pixels and the colors that make up those pixels. All pixels have red, green, and blue in them. Those red, green, and blue also work together to create other colors. So what we're doing here, though, is when an image has been converted to black and white, it's associated these colors to various tones. So what we're doing here is adjusting the brightness level up or down of the pixels that contain red in them and changing those tones. So let's move right to the left. We will darken those tones that had red in it. Let's move it over to the right. We will now lighten those tones. So you would use this prudently. You wouldn't go crazy as I did here because it just blows the whole image out. So what you want to do is, not move too far away from the initial setting, but just enough so that it gives you the edge you're looking for. So I'm going to brighten up this beautiful beast just a little bit. We can go into the yellows, for example, and darken the background somewhat. Now bear in mind when you do this, it's doing this on a global basis. So if there is yellow, which I believe there is, which I will prove in a moment, you are not only just changing the background, you are changing the foreground. So you could get into masking and all kinds of other advanced work, but we won't touch that at this point. We're looking more for global changes. So again, you have to pick a happy medium here. Let's pick the greens. There is green in the grass, so I'm darkening that. So now I'm creating more contrast and my beautiful lion is jumping out more. So I'm going to come back to the yellows and maybe lighten that up just a tad. Now, so I can move these sliders around Some of them, there may not be any of that color tone in your image. So as shown here, I really don't see anything happening in the image as I move the blue slider right or left. And I would imagine the same will probably hold true for magenta, in which case, just don't do anything with it. You can just set it back. Now, that's moving the sliders. We can also use this finger icon, click on it, and what it will do is it will actually provide you with a bit of input that you couldn't otherwise see unless you're really wildly guessing here. And I happen to have been in this image prior, so I know there is red in here, but I wouldn't typically know that by looking at that image. So, especially since the ear is black. So as I click on here and now I move right or left, watch the slider. You're going to see the right slider move right or left. Now again, there is red throughout this image, so it's affecting the whole image, but it's also largely affecting the ear area where I was pointing the eyedropper. So anyway, have fun with the black and white tool. It really is great. It's powerful. They've certainly made the whole process simpler. I must say there is a similar tool available in Lightroom. It actually presents you with 8 color options, has the finger. It's a little circle, I believe, as opposed to the finger, but the point is it works exactly the same. So feel free to apply the same logic that we just talked about here in Lightroom as well. Now I'm going to delete this, and we're going to start this whole process again, and we're going to talk about Silver Effects Pro and how to process black and white images through that tool. So what it will do, similar to the black and white tool, it'll create a layer specifically for silver effects. So let's click on this. And I'm going to click on all just in case and natural. So I'm positive that we're at the bare bones version. So what we see here on the left is the presets, and there are 48 of them in total inside of Silver Effects. Some are nicer than others, some are just downright ugly, and some have borders, they have special effects. That's of real note. Really not a big deal because you can turn those special effects off if they really don't suit the image style that you're going after. Up here we have before and after, which we'll talk about in a moment as we begin to make changes. And on the right hand side are the various options to make global changes. You can make localized changes, but that is beyond the topic of this discussion at this point. So let's actually work in this area first, and then we'll come back to the presets, because the presets will override what I do here, which would be a natural deviation at that point. So one of the first things I want to draw your attention to is back in the days of film, and if you were shooting black and white images, you would typically add a color filter onto your lens to get a desired effect. Well, this is mimicking that exact function. You can add a red filter, and it will give you the red filter image. You can add a green filter, you can add a blue filter, or you can add no filter whatsoever. You can come back in and on a global basis, change the brightness. And I'm not going to go through every last slider, I'm just using brightness as an example. You can change the overall brightness of the image. I'm going to set that back to what it came in at, which was 0. Here's the part I like. You can actually focus in on the highlights, midtones, or shadows, and the brightness of that area alone. So pay attention to the background here. I'm not going to change the background because it's not a highlight. I am going to change the lion because there is a lot of highlight in that. So I'm going to darken the lion. Oh, I went the wrong way. So actually I'm just going to move right over so you can see the effect of it, and move right over. So again, the background is not changing, but the foreground is. Let's change the background. Let's actually make it darker so that the Oh, I went the wrong way again. So that the line actually does pop. And because I've done that, I want to lighten up my line just a bit. There you go. So, and there are other sliders in this area. You can change structure, which amounts to sharpening or detail. There are various contrast levels. You can change the whites, the blacks. The soft contrast is a nice slider. Again, just creates a little more contrast. So we'll leave it at that. And you can add um, vignettes, you can put borders on. We're not going to get into any of that. Then on the left side, this is probably the area I work in the most. So I look for a preset that I like, and then I come over and I start to actually work on the detail within that preset to make it mine. But if Nick has done all the hard work for me and I can use it as a starting point, then I'm all in. It just saves me time. So I'm randomly going to pick some. Whether we like them or not, that's not the issue. Um, I'm just giving you an idea. So like I said, some are better than others. But if you did like it, let's assume you liked this one, the push process, then I would make my way over to this side and start to customize it and make this my own. So there. All right, so I could do that. If I want to compare it to the original versus what's happening, or I can see both images side by side, or up and down, or side by side, or I could say, split the screen and show me the before on the left and the after on the right. So in terms of visuals and working, it's a much nicer environment, in my opinion. We won't get into masking in this session. I am doing a follow-up session on masking, and we will come back into Nick, and I will show you some masking. It makes masking a whole lot easier than it is in Photoshop. Anyway, we've come back into Photoshop. Unfortunately, as I was saving the image in Nick, my Photoshop crashed, so I was not able to save the final image to show it to you here, but it would have simply shown up as its brand new layer, and it would have said Silver Effects Pro as its name. I hope you've enjoyed this session on both black and white inside of Photoshop and the Nick black and white tool. As I said at the beginning, I use both extensively. Neither is really better than the other. They just do things differently, but they really do make my life a whole lot easier. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this.